What's up, everyone? I am back with another tour talk. So we have kind of separated these up a little bit. Anything that's coaching related, we've moved over to the Strike Tutor channel, which is a new company I'm a part of. But anything pro shop related, bowling ball related, technical bowling ball related, we're still going to house here at Virtue Bowling Supply. And today I have Bryan Buckosh from Brunswick Bowling Products with me to talk about all of the really technical nitty-gritty core stuff. He's a core designer for Brunswick Bowling Products. He focuses on the Hammer brand, which obviously everyone loves. I would think is probably your guys' top selling brand, and Columbia 300 and DV8. Is that right, Brian?
That's correct.
All right, cool. So I'm going to give you guys a quick background on Brian so we can dive into the real nerdy stuff for those of you that are here for that, because that's why I'm here. A lot of people may not know it, but I love the nerdy core stuff. So Brian comes from bowling, a family of bowling. His dad owned a bowling center, also ran the pro shop, and his dad was a longtime friend of Mo's. And coincidentally, Brian also went to school, got a degree in engineering, material science engineering, right, Brian?
That's correct.
Yeah, so he already kind of had the brain there, and sounds like already the network as well of people to kind of learn about it. And he ended up bowling in college, so he kind of understand it as a competitor. And then start to apply kind of what he learned in school. He originally applied with Brunswick, didn't quite get the job. It was right before the EBI acquisition, and then they picked him up right afterwards. And now he manages 3 brands, and there's another engineer we'll talk about that manages 3 brands. Anything you think I missed there that's important, Brian, for them to get an idea of your expertise and background?
No, that's a great overview. My dad was an IPSIA certified coach, and yeah, the bowling center was my babysitter for a long time. So as long as I could roll a ball down a lane, I've been involved in bowling, and what a perfect fit for my career.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's always one of the most interesting things about bowling is people kind of fall in love with it in the community, and then they have these other skills, and they're like, man, how can I use these skills in bowling? Because I just love it so much. So we're going to go into core design, but most specifically, Brian, you guys have been working on kind of science and systems for two-handed layouts specifically, which you prepared a presentation you're going to go over with us here today, which is, I guess, is public information, but not a lot of people know about it. And most importantly, when they do get the information, they don't have the guy who designed it to ask questions and talk to when they're going through it. So we're going to go through that today as well. And then I'm just going to also ask some just general questions about, your job and how it works. You ready to get started? Any questions for me?
Yeah, excellent. I don't have any questions for you, but I will say to the people watching, it feels like new systems, there's always a barrier to entry because it looks daunting and difficult and complex. So hopefully this information helps you digest it a little bit, whether you're a pro shop operator who's trying to apply it in your shop or just a two-handed no-thumb bowler who's trying to learn a little bit more about layouts or equipment for your specific game. Hopefully this is helpful to you. And if you don't get everything 100%, don't feel bad about it. There's a lot going on here, but I think there's something for everyone to take away, for every experience level to take away. You'll learn a little bit of something here in this presentation. So put on your thinking caps.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think I have a lot of questions already kind of listed out, but they might naturally come up during the presentation. So I think we just dive right into the presentation and then go from there. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good to me.
So I'll let you start kind of working on that. And then while you're doing that, I can kind of talk a little bit about the general state of layout. So, right now in the shops, we use a lot of dual angle layouts. We use VLS and then 2LS. And so I'm really excited to see kind of what they have here and how it can improve, for everything here at Virtue and everything that we do. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so for one-handed thumb-in players, we're still recommending dual angle layouts. That's the system that is most world-renowned in all the pro shops. Everyone kind of understands the language, and it's a simple layout process to apply to a bowling ball, but there are some caveats to no-thumb bowlers where the dual angle layouts don't quite cooperate with the center of grip distance. And we'll get into that a little bit in the presentation, but different VAL angles give you different resulting numbers after drilling. That changes the motion a little bit player to player. So we found a way to help that, but not only that, we also developed a system to basically allow no-thumb bowlers to get a wider range of ball motions with their layouts. And there's a couple of reasons for that. here's some of the issues that we're addressing with these players. First of all, two-handed no-thumb bowlers, the PAPs can be all over the map. With your fingers and your thumb locked into the ball for a one-handed or thumb-in player, the PAPs are usually pretty neutral coordinate over in the range between 4 and 5 inches over, maybe a little up, maybe a little down. But with no-thumb bowlers, we're seeing PAP coordinates that are 2 inches over, 3 inches up, 6 and 3/8 inches over, 2 and 5/8 inches down. So the distance between all the PAPs on the surface of the bowling ball is truly wild, and that's because without your thumb being locked into the ball, you can have all kinds of different palm locations and rotations off your hand that aren't necessarily achievable. So what that means is that every core design isn't as versatile or isn't as matched up player to player. So we set out to kind of address that issue with some of the designs that DV8 has. And that's not the only issue surrounding no-thumb bowlers. You used to be able to fine-tune your reaction if you didn't like it with adding a thumb hole or adding a balance hole. There was a point where you could put both additional holes in the bowling ball and not use them. Then they eliminated balance holes and said, okay, only fingers and a thumb hole. And then the USB-C further eliminated that. And now you can only put the gripping holes, which is usually just the 2-finger holes for the no-thumb bowler, in the bowling ball now. So because of that, you've lost some of your fine-tuning tools, such as your ability to change the differentials, for example, of the post-drilled ball with the thumb hole itself. There's just
on the differential side, it's a good segue, Brian, if you don't mind me asking, I guess, to help, the regular league bowler, the regular viewer kind of understand, like, okay, well, why dual angle layouts, or, I guess to kind of cut out the middleman, so to speak, of the layout tool, right? I think a lot of league bowlers or bowlers that do research on product, they understand RG and maybe differential, right? What I'll do is I'll try to recap it in a way that might help with them, and you please tell me if this is incorrect. So there is a range of RGs, first of all, right, of a core, and when they see an RG of the bowling ball online, that is the lowest RG, I believe, of the core. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's also called the RG min. It's the RG of the pin axis, or in our case, some of our balls have dot technology, the dot axis, but same thing. So that's the lowest advertised RG, and the RGs are relatively stable. So when you hear me talk about layouts and post-drilled layouts and things, I don't reference the RG all that much, because the RG of the undrilled ball, it's gonna be kind of in that range. So like if it's a medium RG when it's undrilled, it's kind of a medium RG when it's drilled. So I talk a lot more about differentials and intermediate differentials, if you want to pick back up with that.
Yeah, exactly. So to just try and help maybe the average customer who understands RGs and differentials to understand maybe why the layout matters, or why using the right layout system matters. Once you understand RG, and you at least now know that there's a range of RGs, when they're choosing the layout, if say this is a core, Brian, RG is basically just saying that if you were to try to spin the core this way, you're going to get a different kind of reaction or force than if you were to spin the core this way, right?
Yeah, so RGs, differentials, and intermediate differentials are all mathematically related. It's kind of they're simple equations, but it gets a little over bowlers' heads. The simple analogy is that it is the resistance to spinning the core. And I have a bunch of cores. This is actually one of the cores we're going to talk about a little later. This is the heckler core, but RGs of different axes. So how easy it is to spin it on the min axis right here, the pin axis or the dot axis. That would be the min RG. That's the RG that you always see advertised. But you also have the high RG axis, which is spinning in a completely different plane in this direction. And if it's asymmetrical, you have the intermediate RG axis, which is spinning in this third direction. So you can spin this core on the 3 primary axes, and those different values give you the different strengths of the core relative to one another.
Right.
So when we talk about differential, it's actually the difference in how easy or hard it is to spin on the max axis versus the min axis, and intermediate differential for asymmetry, how easy or hard it is to spin it on the intermediate axis relative to the max axis. So again, they're all related to each other, but what the end user, all they really need to know is if the differential is high, the flare potential is high, the potential for ball motion or change of direction is also high. And with intermediate differential, the strength at the break point is high, the torque factor is high, or the ability for the ball to change direction quickly or sharply is also high. And if those values are low, if the differential is low, or if the intermediate differential is low.
Yeah, and I think the thing I want to confirm with you technically, and also maybe help those at home with or watching this, is that I think sometimes bowlers and even pro shop guys kind of think, okay, here are the starting core numbers, and it's kind of these starting core numbers plus this layout equals X ball reaction. But in reality, would you say it's fair to say that really all the layout is really doing is changing the resulting core numbers? So it's still
exactly
it's kind of all layout is really trying to tell you. It's almost like a language interpreter where it's able to look at the layout of the ball and tell you the new core numbers after drilling. So it's almost like translating it for you. But at the end of the day, the key component of the layout is really just what are the resulting core numbers and what RG plane am I putting the PAP on? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so what happens really is every time you drill a ball, you're removing mass, and when you remove mass, you've changed the shape. So in the example of, and this speaks to the third point on the presentation here, when you put fingers and a thumb in a ball, you're removing mass from the top and the bottom, but you're also removing mass from the side, right? And so relatively speaking, in a pin-up layout, the pin or the dot would be in this orientation. Then you have changed how easy or hard it is to spin the core on a particular axis based on, if you remove mass from the top, you've shortened the core. If you remove mass from the side with the thumb, for example, you've skinnied that core up. Mm-hmm. With no thumb layouts, you're changing the mass removal at different points, but only one point, right? Fingers and thumb for a one-handed bowler, you're removing mass this way. But with just no thumb bowlers, you're only removing it from one point. If you have a weak layout near the dot, you've shortened the core. If you have a strong layout far away from the dot or the pin, and you put your fingers in the side of the ball, so to say, then you've narrowed up that core, made it stronger, but you don't counteract, those fingers and thumb in a thumb in layout, they are relatively counteracting each other, giving you a more net neutral layout. Whereas the finger position being just one individual location, the bridge center, the center of grip for a no-thumb bowler, we're changing the height or the width a lot more drastically in one direction or the other. So the resulting RG values are changed a lot more drastically in one direction or the other. So the center of grip distance, which we don't even talk about really in a thumb-in layout, suddenly becomes a huge key component of the layout system of a no-thumb bowler. And that's one of the key reasons that we decided to add additional resources to help pro shops kind of key in on that dot to center distance to get the layout.
So when you're going through all those scenarios, though, I noticed that you kind of really emphasize that where the holes go determine the performance changes to the core, right?
Yeah.
Which is to say that the 30-degree val angle isn't necessarily really the end-all be-all. The end-all be-all is what is the ball's resulting differential. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. And so the layouts themselves, like the VAL angle or the dot to center of grip distance or the pin to PAP distance, all of those values are dependent on the bowler, and they're, regardless if it's thumb in or no thumb, they're just there to position the finger holes relative to the inner core. Right. Because it's really the mass removal of the inner core that is changing the dynamics of the ball. And so the undrilled values, they're there as a reference, as a starting point, but realistically, no one is throwing a ball down the lane without holes in it. So it's the starting values plus the change after you've put your holes in it that really matters in terms of the final drilled ball and the final properties of the ball that you get. And for the sake of time, we'll just run through. I have a lot to say on that, so we'll just run through the presentation. And at any point, if you have any other questions, we can do it. But this presentation is going to be a lot about how we manipulate the numbers for the no-thumb bowlers in particular. So here at DV8, we came up with a system for no-thumb bowlers to address some of the issues that we talked about with the layout system. It's actually a patent pending system as we speak. There's a number of people here at Brunswick that are on that patent. And what I have here is just a generic overview of the technology that's inside of each of these. Each of these individual cores look very different, but they all have the same system involved, where we have an upper cap, what we call a bowl. It's effectively kind of like a void that's filled with outer core compound material, and a core side. So depending on where you drill your fingers, either to hit that knob, to miss the inner core by drilling into the bowl core or to hit the side of the core, you can drastically change the final shape of these cores. And here I have the same slide that highlights the 3 cores that are currently in our no-thumb layout system, like our no-thumb patent pending technology cores for the DV8 series. So we have the original Troublemaker. This starts out as a mid-differential symmetrical ball, so a benchmark style symmetrical ball. We have Dark Side here in the middle. This is actually a low diff kind of Tor style ball before you drill it at 0.36 total differential. And here we have the ball that we're going to talk the most about in this presentation. This is an asymmetrical ball. It is Heckler Hybrid, and it starts out very mildly asymmetrical, and you'll see that depending on where you put the fingers, either through the knob, we'll call it zone 1, through the core bowl, or the cover compound, which is, or excuse me, the core compound, which is effectively missing the inner core material, that's zone 2. Or if you drill your fingers around the side of the core in zone 3, you can really, really impact the resulting differential numbers and the resulting ball motion that you get out of any one of these cores, but really the Heckler Hybrid is what we'll focus on. So just as an example of this, what I'm going to do is put on the screen, well, this is just an overview of Heckler Hybrid before we get to that. It's out to the public now. It does have HK22 cover base, which is one of our strongest cover bases that has cohesion in it. Cohesion helps the ball slow down at the back of the lane. So this is one of our most dynamic cover stocks in terms of its ability to change direction. We've been using slightly smoother cover stocks overall in the DV8 lineup to pair with some of the high rev, high speed, high impact angle bowlers to allow them to kind of control the lane a little better. So this is actually kind of away from that a little bit and giving them a more dynamic reaction in the lineup with the Heckler Hybrid. If you want a little more overall control front to back or left to right, of course, the original Heckler is still available.
Yeah, now, there was a lot in that. You mentioned a characteristic that you're trying to do with this technology to help those kinds of bowlers that are high speed, high rev rate, creating a lot of angle down lane, to try to help them control the ball motion a bit more. What was the characteristic that you had said that kind of helps them control the ball motion a bit more?
Oh, I was saying that with some of the other options like the Dark Side series, the Troublemaker series, and the original Heckler, we have a lot of options where the cover stock is just a smoother, more blended cover stock. The resulting motion is smoother and more blended. So the cover stock is the varying degrees of strength. Heckler is going to be your strongest cover stock. Dark Side is going to be your weakest, but all of them kind of give you more of an arcing blended motion as opposed to a really whippy or skid flippy motion to allow those types of players to control the lane. But of course, as with the PAPs, there's a range of rev rates, ball speeds, and everything with no thumb bowlers as well. And in this case, we actually went the other route. We went with a slightly more dynamic cover stock to give you a slightly sharper change of direction, just a more dynamic cover stock shape for better change of direction, harder change of direction, a little more whippy, skid flippiness, if you will. In this particular model, the Heckler Hybrid, to give you a little more of a range of options in the DV8 lineup, because there's plenty of control options, and now we're also giving you a stronger, sharper option as well. Cool. But that's not to say that high rev players or low ball speed players can't use this as well, because as you'll see after we go through the undrilled numbers, I'm going to show you the range of numbers that you can get for different layout options. And it's pretty staggering how different the post-drilled numbers can be depending just on where you put your finger holes into this core. So just as a quick reference, I will have these numbers on screen the whole time so that you can remember back to what the original core started as. And when we drill the ball, like digitally drill the ball, then you guys will be able to see exactly what the changes are. So before you put holes in this ball, it's a very medium RG at 250. That means it's gonna not rev up too fast, but it's not gonna rev up too late either. It's right in the middle. 051 is on the high side for differential, so that's gonna be higher flare potential. Again, this is all undrilled. And 010 intermediate differential is just very, very lightly asymmetric. It's barely asymmetric, and it's going to give you effectively symmetrical ball motion with just a little extra kick at the break point, just a little sharper change of direction than a symmetrical ball would. The whole game with this is being able to change the resulting layouts. I actually have this lightweight core here in front of me. This is actually the generic lightweight core that we use for DV8. And even though the numbers are a little more muted, higher RG, lower total differential, it gives you all the technology that we built into the heavier weight ones for younger players that are just getting into the game. Of course, if you go to a youth league, youth tournament, you'll notice that there's an incredibly high percentage of no thumb bowlers or two-handed bowlers that are like entering the game. It seems to be easier for young kids who are learning the game to be able to throw it with both hands on the ball. Helps their body weight to ball weight ratio, a little more control and everything else.
Exactly.
And so we're giving them the ability to use this exact same technology. So if you remember from a couple slides ago, I had that generic core that had the top, the bowl side, and then the core side. So depending on where you drill your fingers, you could hit all three of those. The core shape, pretty different from the heckler, but it gives you the exact same technology and gives you the same control over your layout. So that's just an interesting point, because the other brands, they use a more generic core shape that doesn't allow you drilling versatility. So if you have a young player who's just getting into two-handed no-thumb bowling, you want to give them a little bit of drilling versatility if they either have really high speed or really low speed, and you need to change the layout to help with their control one way or another, then this is an amazing option to do that.
Now, I don't know in the presentation if you have the slides for this, but so you're mentioning, essentially, to recap, a lot of the new DV8 cores kind of have this bowl or this voided area within the core. Even in the lighter weight balls, you still have.
And I'll go back here.
Yep. Yeah. And so you were just showing, even in that lighter weight ball for younger kids that have lower weights, you're still kind of having that technology. Now, when we're looking at the core and the way that you're presenting it, we kind of think of that as almost a complete void where it's air, but it's actually filled with the normal outer core material, right?
Exactly.
So it's not that you're really drilling into air when you drill into those areas. You're actually drilling out the usual. Is the outer core what you would call it? Is that the right?
That's excuse me if I bounce around with my terminology. It's called the outer core. It's blue dynamic core material, and we also call it compound material because it's a really light compound mix. And the inner core material, by about 2.5 times, is by far the heaviest material in the ball. The cover stock would be the second heaviest, but it's always the same density. You can't change it, right? And then the compound material, it is the absolute lightest. That dynamic core material, it's super lightweight. So again, I said like the inner core is probably in the range between 2.5, probably around 2.5 times as dense as that lightweight material.
You guys can't change the inner core material even in the lighter balls, even in the 12 or 13 pound balls. Do you guys change?
Yeah. So the inner core and the outer core, we're able to change the density mix for those to accommodate whatever our design is. So it'll be set, and they're always a heavier density, but what the actual density is depends incredibly on the individual core design. So if I have 3 cores sitting in front of me, all 3 of those inner cores will have different densities, and their compounds, their outer core cover materials, will also have different densities, and the sum total of those have to add up to get the right gross weight to make a 15-pound ball or whatever.
That was to all go into my next question, which is, over the years as the pro shop operator, we've seen kind of that light bulb looking like shape for years. Have you, or do you have further in the presentation, or can you speak to, and if I'm getting ahead, just be like, hey, we're going to get to that, or there's a slide that will help me answer that better. I'm notorious for getting ahead. Comparing what are the resulting core numbers with like the same layout if there wasn't a void there versus if there was a void.
So we'll get into all that. I think what I'll do is I'll jump ahead to back to where the slides were. I'll talk a little bit about why we're putting the mass in specific locations, because it's not just the void that we're talking about. We're also looking at the finger intersection with the inner core. So I'll start explaining that, and I'll get back to that question of what happens with standard cores, normal cores that don't have this technology. So let me go ahead and get where we're going. All of these cores, whether it's the lightweight core, the symmetrical cores that I showed you, or this heckler core, which is the asymmetric one, they all have kind of the same system, which is the core top. We're calling that zone number 1. The void, which is just compound material, which is zone number 2, and the core side, which is zone number 3. And these are represented by distances on the surface of the bowling ball when you drill into them. And so anything in the range between 0 inches, which is on the dot or on the pin, all the way up to like, say, 1.5 inches, you're going to hit that core top in all of these cores. If you're in the range between 2.5 and 3.5 inches from the dot to your center of grip, which is the bridge center, the finger center, then you're going to drill into this compound material, and you're relatively missing the core. You're just hitting the compound material. You're missing the inner core. And then if your fingers get really far away, people call these tall pin layouts, but if your fingers are really far away from the dot or the pin to the center of grip, and you're hitting the side of the core, then you're really hitting that inner core material immediately, and there's barely any compound in between the shell of the ball and the inner core, and you're really changing the numbers by removing that material.
Right, makes sense.
So layouts in this area are weak,
and
layouts in this area are neutral, and layouts in this area are very strong.
Right, and is that in the 3 to 3.5 inches from the dot?
Yeah, so 2.5 to 3.5 inches is what gets you in the void, and anything longer, like say 4 to 4.5 inches, and we recommend going all the way up to 5.5 inches, will get you into the core side. We don't recommend longer than 5.5 inches because those start over flaring dramatically. They can be strong mid lane motions, but they can be kind of adverse in the sense that they can overflare, read in the mid lane, quit down lane, and for some players, they flare around the whole ball. It's a little ridiculous. So we're recommending the range between 1.5 inches for your weakest layouts and 5.5 inches for your strongest layouts. And remember, we're just talking about the finger distance from the pin or the dot. We're not talking about pin to PAP. That's a whole different number. We're just talking about where the fingers are located. So I have 3 examples on the screen. You've got a weak layout here, a moderate layout here, and a strong layout here. And there's your relative difference from the dot at the top to the fingers. And that correlates to the top of the core right here, which, is your dot on the surface of the bowling ball. Yep.
Okay, cool. Great.
Yeah. So I have really, I tried to spell this out as easy as possible. I have a core cut cross section for each of these individual layouts, and we're just going to go through the individual numbers. Now, I know people's eyes can glaze over, they can get kind of lost in the numbers, but we're just looking at relative differences. So I'm not expecting anyone to memorize any numbers or anything like that, but I just want you to look at the relative change that happened. I have the undrilled ball on the top of the chart in blue, and then what happens when you drill the fingers in the location on the screen in red. So in this case, we're in zone number 1. The fingers are very, very close to the dot. We've drilled directly through the top of the core. We've effectively shortened this core. When you shorten the core by drilling material out, you effectively shorten the core and your differential falls out of it. So it started at 051 total differential, but it went all the way down to 038. So that is a big difference if you think about it. An 050 is a relatively high flaring ball by most people's standards. 038, however, is more in like the tour style range of ball motion, where the flare spacing is much tighter, the motion is much more controlled, a much more gradual arc overall throughout the belly of the lane, and just overall more control. So not even really that close to our original drilled ball. And you notice the intermediate differential didn't change all that much because we're not drilling near the max axis or the intermediate axis. So effectively, it is what it is. Now, if we drill the core just a tiny bit stronger, now this distance is 2.5 inches in this case from the dot to the center of grip. You're starting to get more neutral core numbers that are more representative of the original undrilled ball. So this core again started at 051. Now we're at 046. So a little drop in total differential, and that's because we've just shaved the very top edge of that knob. So the differential did fall a little bit. But for the most part, the finger is in that void, in that bowl between the core. So you'll notice that the numbers are much more like the undrilled core is, because we haven't really hit the core that much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And now to bring back in kind of my first question, in this case, a league bowler might see this layout and go, this is a pin-up layout, which is usually supposed to be a strong layout. So they might traditionally think, okay, I have this bowling ball that's 051 diff, and I have this strong layout on it, so it should be an even stronger ball, right? But in this particular case, the differential is actually going down with the layout that they would usually perceive as and you can tell me if this is incorrect, but I think it's because a lot of in the same way that we used to see like static weights, and we would think, oh, the CG is over here, so I have 7/8 side weight, and that would mean that I have a really aggressive layout. We kind of formed these visual cues, so to speak, not necessarily really knowing how the science is working. So because there's only been thumb in bowlers for so long, and that, you know, if you put the fingers in the same spot where you have in this picture and you added a thumb to it, you know, obviously this core is a little different, but the differential traditionally would probably go up, right? Because of the thumb, right?
Exactly. And the thumb is so much further around the side of the ball. Here's an example. Visually, it looks like people cue their visuals off of the finger holes. You know, the fingers in a thumb in bowler and a no thumb bowler look like they're in the same spot, but the difference is the center of grip is not in the same spot. Because with a thumb in player, you've got your fingers here, your thumb here, your center of grip is down in the middle of them. However, with a no thumb bowler, the center of grip is the bridge center. So even though the center of grip is here for a thumb in player, it's actually way up here for a no thumb player. And to get the same resulting ball motion or similar resulting ball motion, the intermediate diff will still be different. As a thumb in player with the center of grip here, you actually have to toggle the fingers quite a bit further down to the center of grip, if you think about it. So it requires quite a bit longer distance than you expect from the pin to the center of grip for no thumb bowlers to get resulting ball motion that's kind of on level with thumb in players. Yeah. Now, one of the issues that we sought to address with no thumb bowlers is with just 2 fingers drilled into the ball, you really can't change that intermediate differential number all that much. You notice in the first 2 layouts, we've only gone from 10 to 12. So we've affected almost no change. Part of that is because in the neutral layouts, we're not hitting the inner core material. But part of that is a product of just drilling 2 small little holes in the ball. You know, the thumb is usually an inch and a quarter or an 1 3/8 slug, and it's drilled like a crater in the ball, you know, 3.5 inches deep. The finger holes traditionally, they only get drilled maybe 1 3/4 to 2 inches for the finger grips. We're recommending, and this is an aside from the PowerPoint, but we're recommending that you drill your fingers for all players, all no thumb bowlers, 3 inches deep. And that's a pretty dramatic change from 1 3/4 to put your finger grips in it. So 3 inches deep, and you'll notice on the slides actually that you can see past the finger grip, these finger holes are drilled 3 inches deep. And even as deep as that is, it's still barely clipping the inner core because it's purpose built not to get hit.
And I think
but the reason we pick 3 is so that you can impact the after drilling numbers in the same way that a thumb in player does, because usually in order to remove core mass, you got to get really deep into the ball to hit the core. In our case with the DV8 cores, you can see how close to the shell they are. You don't have to drill that deep, but you should to move mass and to impact enough change.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the idea that you're also talking about depth, I think still hits to the heart of the subject, which is for pro shop operators out there, is really not necessarily trying to boil down your understanding to just a layout level, right? But to really kind of understand what's going on under the hood, because you could change even the depth of the holes based on the layout and get different resulting core numbers. But the key is you have to understand how you're actually changing the resulting core numbers when you're drilling the ball.
Yeah.
And the layout methods, obviously they're there to help make it easier and make it a little bit simpler so you don't have to understand so much. But if you can put in the time to really understand, then you can decide, okay, well, maybe I want to go shallow here or deeper here, and you can even maybe fine tune it to an even more granular level. Is that fair?
Yeah, you can totally do that. We're recommending 1 set depth of 3 inches because that's a nice balance between affecting enough change by drilling into the inner core. But also, if you go any deeper, you start getting pitch intersection issues where the ring and the middle finger will intersect each other and leave a void at the bottom. Even at 3 inches, some of the laterals are not enough and you will get pitch intersection issues. So we're not recommending drilling any deeper than 3. But if you drill less than 3, you're really not affecting as much change as you want in the actual layout. And that becomes especially true for these balls that are not DV8 balls, like any other brand's balls, where the core, you know, they're smaller cores, maybe a shape like this or something, where you really have to drill pretty far in before you get to the inner core. So you really need to remove more mass with the drill bit in order to actually make a change for a pinup versus a short pin layout or whatever. So
Okay.
yeah, so this is one of our neutral layouts. And then if we toggle the fingers just a little further around, we're still technically in zone 2 of the core. We're still in that bull side, but now instead of 2.5 inches, we're 3.5 inches away from the dot. And you notice that even though we're a little further away, we've gotten the exact same resulting differential as the undrilled ball. That's because we've mostly hit compound material, the blue dynamic core material, but we have started to shave the side of the core just a little bit with the finger hole. And because of that, we're affecting the intermediate differential just a little bit. Now we've gone up 5 points to 15. So this is a stronger flaring, but on the benchmark side, this is what I would call a strong benchmark reaction for the post-drilled numbers, where it's like relatively high differential and a little bit of intermediate differential. Still, again, not too far off from the drilled numbers, and that's because of the void that we have in these DV8 cores.
And the 50% increase, the 50% increase in intermediate diff too is significant at 50%, right? I mean,
yeah, and it's not always 50%. By way of it being very small in the beginning, it looks like the change is much greater. But if it started at 20 and it only went to 25, it would look like a much smaller change, right? But it is the fact that we are drilling kind of in a void where we're removing the least dense material, the blue dynamic core material. The effect is not that great. And that will change drastically as soon as you hit the core side. Look at the difference now. Now we're cooking, because look at the total differential and look at the intermediate differential. We've only moved it 1 inch from 3.5 to 4.5 inches. So now we're 4.5 inches from the dot to the center of grip of the fingers, and we've impacted the side of the core immediately. And this core is massive by volume. The shell is like right here. And the shape of the core at the top and on the side is concentric, meaning it's like shaped to be the profile of the ball. So no matter where you swing your mass bias, or no matter how you kind of do that, you know, the angle of the fingers, you're still going to hit the core side. You're still going to hit the void. You're still going to hit the core top. That being said, it's so close at the top and at the sides that there's basically less than 1/2 inch of compound material in between the shell and the inner core. So basically, by the time your drill bit is all the way through the cover stock material of the ball, your tip of your bit is already touching this inner core side. So you're immediately hitting the most dense material and removing the most dense material. When you have your fingers so far around the side of the ball, you narrow up this inner core and you make it taller relatively to how wide it is. And when you make the core taller, you're raising the intermediate differential and you're raising the total differential as well. So now we've got a ball that's almost 60 differential. The USB-C limit for undrilled balls is 60, so we're right there at the limit of the undrilled ball. There's no limit after drilling, so it can go above, no problem. And the intermediate differential has more than doubled from 10 to 22. So if you picked this ball thinking that you were going to have a mild asim, you can actually lay it out to be dramatically stronger. And the utility for that is, like, there are some no-thumb players that still have high ball speed or are just a little rev challenged. You know, there are all types of player styles, including speed dominant no-thumb players. So if you want the same type of cover technology as your friend or your teammate on a college bowling team, for example, but they are a much more rev dominant player, they can use a weaker layout, and you, being the speed dominant player, can use a much stronger layout and still use the same cover technology, still kind of use the same lane play strategies, that type of thing at the same time. So that's kind of one of the utilities of having the range. So big.
That leads directly into my question, which was, you know, if say I want a ball that's, you know, 059 diff, 022 intermediate diff, etc., you know, how, as a bowler, how should I think about, you know, buying, say, this heckler and drilling it in this way to get to those numbers versus buying a ball that starts off closer to those numbers and drilling it a different way?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I would say it all comes down to, like, the utility of where you want to put it in your bag. Like, for other companies, if you wanted a ball that's in the range of 60-20, you'd have to buy a ball that's just under that and then put an estimate of whatever the right layout is to get the numbers that you want. They don't necessarily publish what layout, the resulting layouts you're going to get for a no-thumb bowler. But on top of that, if you want to change, you have to change the cover stock material as well, or you have to change, like, the model of the ball. So you have to go from maybe a sanded solid to a polished hybrid, there might not be another polished hybrid, like this one is a polished hybrid, so I'll use that as an example. There might not be another polished hybrid asymmetrical ball in the lineup at that time that has the core numbers that you want to jump to. So if you want 2 balls in your bag, you want them both to be relatively shiny balls that are skid flippy, but you want one to have weak core numbers and one to have strong core numbers. You've got to reach for 2 different balls, and you have to hope that in that company's lineup, they've got the 2 you're looking for. Or in our case, I need 2 shiny skid flip balls, one to be weak, one to be strong. Great, Heckler hybrid. One with a weak layout, one with a strong layout, your bases are covered, right?
Right.
And we actually do that in the DV8 videos. We drill either, depending on the player, we'll drill either 2 or 3 Heckler hybrids with dramatically different pin to center of grip distances, just to display the difference in flare potential and the difference in motion shape. Now, of course, in a 6-ball bag, maybe you don't need 2 Heckler hybrids, but the options are there to do that if you wish. And if not, you can at least fine tune the one that you have to fit the part of the bag that you want. You can. There's the utility to pick the exact cover stock you want. We're not worried about the core numbers before drilling. Pick the exact cover stock you want. You want a weak one, get a dark side. You want a strong benchmark, get a Heckler. You want a skid flippy benchmark, get a Heckler hybrid. And then fine tune the numbers to your game. So that's the real reason here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think to add to that as a bowler, real quick, for me, I find like certain covers I really like a lot, and I found that other other high level bowlers, like they'll have a cover they really like a lot that matches up well for them. And so if you can understand with your pro shop operator a range of layouts where you can keep the same cover, but then ultimately get 2 different cores. And I think that's probably the most important takeaway here is that just because the undrilled core is the same in the 2 balls, it doesn't mean you end up with the same core with the 2 drilled bowling balls. And that's the beauty of where to put the holes at.
Other cores, like you drill we'll call it a standard or a generic core with these drastically different pin to center of grip distances, you will get differences. They just won't be nearly as dramatic as this. There's no way you can go from 10 to 25. And this is the last slide of the layout section. There's no way you could get 25 intermediate differential out of a 10 intermediate differential undrilled ball with any other system other than DV8's core technology. And that's just because you're removing so much mass so quickly from the side of this core in these strong layouts. So yeah, this is the last layout slide. 5.5-inch dot to center of grip results in an 0.64 total differential, 0.25 intermediate differential, and you've gone all the way around the side of the core. Your fingers are very far away from the dot, and you're hitting smack into the side of the core, removing as much material as you can. So much so that in manufacturing, they actually told me to chill on how close we're getting the core to the outer core mold for the compound. Because this gets inserted in the outer core and the material pours around it. But this blue dynamic core material, it pours more like a Wendy's Frosty. It's not liquid, right? It doesn't pour like Coca-Cola. It pours like a Frosty. And it has to flow around this core and down to the bottom and fill up in a certain amount of time for manufacturing. And we're pressing the limits so hard on these DV8 cores that they said, hey, be careful about that because we're having some issues. Yeah, you won't find another core that has this range of numbers. So that's a good place to pause right there. I do have some more information about DV8's resources, where to find them, some resources for pro shops, some resources for no thumb bowlers. So not only are there challenges for designing a core for this range of no thumb bowlers that we have now, but there are also challenges in the layout system, right? We talked about how dual angles doesn't necessarily accommodate the pin to center of grip distance all that well, especially for the range of PAPs that you can get for these no thumb bowlers, because their PAPs are in such various locations on the surface of the bowling ball. But there are limitations not only to dual angles using the VAL angle, but there are also limitations to the 2LS system. Mathematically, 2LS is a sound system. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Mathematically, you can put it on the ball. It works well. But for pro shop operators, it can be really cumbersome. It's an 8-step process. It requires a lightning arc chart that you have to refer to. It requires tangent lines. scribing different arcs on the surface of the ball. An arc ruler is convenient, but otherwise you have to dash the lines and things of that nature. So it's just a time-consuming process, and unfortunately, not all pro shops are well versed in it, even though it's been out for a number of years. Dual angles is much more widely known, and that's one benefit of using dual angles. But again, it has its limitations because the VAL angle changes the center of grip distance for each player. So we kind of found a way to devise a way to do the best of both worlds situation, where our language is still in dual angles, and that's what all the pro shop operators know. But we've given you, as the pro shop operator, a converter tool that allows you to plug in numbers and get dual angles that give you the right center of grip distance for the resulting layout. And so this is what you see here. This is all available on the DV8 website. At the end of the presentation, I'll make sure that you guys know where to go to get it. You can scan the QR code on the screen. That also comes on the ball boxes for the balls that have this technology. So Troublemaker, Heckler, and Dark Side series should all have this QR code somewhere on the ball box, usually on the label. On the DV8 website, you'll be able to find this dot to center of grip distance guide. And this runs through all of the 5 finger locations that we just ran through in this presentation and gives you a quick overview. So it can be a quick reference. You can download this PDF and either save it on your PC in the same location that you save our dual angle converter, or you can just print it out, pin it to the back of your pro shop wall, and have it as a quick reference when you're laying out balls on your bench. So if you're working with a player who's speed dominant, you can quickly reference the guide and say, okay, we want a 4.5 inch distance. That's going to be a strong and sharp motion for a speed dominant player. And there are a couple notes too, like we're not recommending that rev dominant players are using the strong layouts, and we're not recommending that speed dominant players are using the ultra weak layouts. So the range between 2.5 inches and 4.5 inches for dot center of grip has been a nice sweet spot where most player styles across the board can use them safely, and they result in good ball motion.
Now, just to be clear, when you're saying speed dominant, rev dominant, is there anything that like the consumers or a pro shop should think differently or do differently with these balls if they're drilling it for a bowler that does put their thumb in it?
Not in terms of speed or rev dominance, but you're still analyzing them in the same way, where if their speed dominates their rev rate, and speed dominant doesn't necessarily mean ultra fast ball speed. I always think of speed. Right. We're talking about speed to rev rate ratio here. You can have a moderate rev rate, but if your speed is 100, then you're still speed dominant. And conversely, if you have a relatively average rev rate, but your speed is on the low end, even though your rev rate isn't high, you're still a rev dominant bowler because your speed is low. So just looking at the ratio of speed to rev rate. And if you're a match player, then you can pretty much use any of the recommended dot center of grip distances without hesitation. But if you're on one end of the spectrum or the other, you just have to be careful. You don't want weak layouts for speed dominant bowlers or strong layouts for rev dominant bowlers. And that's good advice across the board, thumb in, thumb out, no matter what. So this dual angle converter, this is more for pro shops, but if you're learning how to get into dual angles or learning about layouts, then this is a fun tool just to mess around with. Every layout system, whether it's this one, whether it's dual angles, whether it's 2LS, VLS, any of the systems require you to know your PAP. So make sure you're working with your pro shop operator, get your PAP measured. It's going to be a point on the surface of the ball that's opposite the track. And that is your bowler signature. It's effectively the first rev. When you throw the ball, it's the first revolution that the ball makes right off your hand. That is the axis that the ball is spinning on right off your hand. That is your PAP. That's the positive axis point. So we've broken it into, this converter is available on DV8's website. You download it. It downloads as an Excel file. If you're not running Excel, it should be native in any of the spreadsheets that you're using. It should open in Google Sheets, no problem. If you're using a more generic spreadsheet, it should run with no problems. It might have some ugly interface issues, like it might not be beautiful, but it should operate with no problem. But yeah, so what you're going to do is you're going to input layout features in the gold boxes, and the outputs are going to be in white. So you need to know your bowler's PAP. You're going to input the horizontal and the vertical coordinate. If your bowler is a negative horizontal coordinate, as in 5 over and 1 down, you're just going to put -1 as the vertical coordinate. So negative for negative coordinates. You're going to select whether you're laying out an asymmetrical or a symmetrical ball. The only difference here is that you have control of the drilling angle of an asymmetrical ball, just like you do on dual angles. If it's a symmetrical ball, it's just going to block out the ability to change the drilling angle. And down here, it'll lock the drilling angle to the CG. The CG will fall in line with the center of grip if it's symmetrical. That's just a minor detail, but you can select symmetrical or asymmetrical. Pick your drilling angle just like a dual angle layout. Pick your pin to PAP distance just like a dual angle layout. And the final component is, instead of in dual angles using the VAL angle, we're going to transition to using the distance, the dot to center of grip distance. And that's because the VAL angle has to be different for every unique PAP to get the same dot to center of grip distance. So this conversion is already run for us on the screen. If you have a bowler who's 5 over 0 up down and you want an asymmetrical ball with a 60 by 5 inch layout and the center of grip needs to be 3.5 inches from the pin to the center of grip, that is going to be a 60 by 5 by 39 layout in dual angles. So you just draw that right on the ball. So that all sounds relatively complicated, but effectively, once you pop up in the spreadsheet, do your little inputs, it takes about 20 additional seconds to fill out your spreadsheet, get your answer, draw it directly on the ball. 3 lines on dual angles, and you don't have to do the 8-step 2LS system. It's a really nice, handy system. And 2 out of the 3 components, your pin to PAP and your pin to center of grip, are 2LS components. So that number, pin to center of grip, is actually the last component of the 2LS system anyway. What we're not doing is controlling the middle number and we're controlling that with the drilling angle. We're not using the middle number of 2LS system.
Got it.
And
so
dual angles is just so quick and easy to apply to the ball anyway. So
is it fair to say then that the original VAL angle, the original second angle, was also the key factor in determining resulting differential?
For generic terms like pin up and pin down, toggling that distance or the height from the center of grip of a thumb in player is still toggled by the VAL angle, right? So if you have a very small, so here's your VAL line. If you have a very small VAL angle, then the pin is going to be relatively tall relative to your fingers. And as you increase that VAL angle, the pin starts to fall toward the finger. So it actually controls like pin up versus pin down. And that is also controlling the height to the center of grip. But if your PAP is different, then the VAL angle to get that resulting number is different for everyone. So this is just a screenshot. It's not an interface I can use. But if this number changed from 5 over, actually, I have some examples of drilled balls in the next slides, but just as a precursor to what we're going to talk about, if this was 5 over by 2 up as the bowler's PAP, for example, then it's likely that this VAL angle would have to be larger because the PAP is taller. So to get the same dot to center of grip distance, the VAL angle has to increase in order to get the same distance to the fingers. Right. And I know that's like complicated jargon, but if we look at the next, well, it's in a couple slides. When we get to the slides that show you the drilled ball layouts, we'll show you exactly what happens there. One final resource I wanted to show you, all the numbers I showed you for Heckler in terms of the drilled ball, as well as the Troublemaker series and the Dark Side series, your post-drilled numbers are posted on DV8's website as well. So if you just want a quick reference for what my differential or intermediate differential is going to be for the various dot to center of grip distances, it's available for you as a chart. It looks really daunting, but if you just pick one category, let's look at the middle category. So Troublemaker. The undrilled is your first column. So Troublemaker undrilled is an 0.45 total differential with no intermediate. If we want a 3.5 inch dot to center of grip distance and you drill those fingers as deep as we said, 3 inches, then your resulting numbers are going to be 2503 RG. I can't read that. Yeah, 2503 RG, 0.47 total differential, and 11 intermediate after drilling. So it's just a handy chart that you can use.
Yeah. Now, since we're talking total layout and you have the total layout guide here, I'm going to throw in one question that I already had, which is how should pro shops and consumers, if they want to get into it that much, think about the pin to PAP distance? Now, I'm going to say how I kind of somewhat understand it, but I want to know what how we should think about it. is the pin to PAP distance really how much of the differential that we're using?
This is super interesting because if you've noticed, I've been talking about the finger distance like the whole time, right? I have not been talking about the pin to PAP distance at all, which is interesting because in dual angles, you think a lot about the pin to PAP distance for a thumb in player. We've already talked about we're changing the shape of the core by changing the dot to center of grip distance and removing core material. But what the pin to PAP distance does is it toggles how tilted the core is in the layout. A long pin to PAP distance, your PAP might be somewhere over here as a starting PAP. If you have a long pin to PAP distance, then the distance from the top of the core or the pin to the PAP is long, and that puts the core in a relatively upright position. That means the core is going to roll more end over end as it goes down the lane. So it's a more stable position, and it is a little less dynamic. It's a little less change of direction. Now, if you toggle the pin to PAP distance to be shorter or more aggressive, say 3 3/8, for example, the PAP remains the same, but you've gotten that pin or that dot shorter or closer to the pin to the PAP, that distance becomes shorter, that core becomes more tilted, and now it's in a more unstable, more dynamic position when it's rotating. The core is kind of in an angry, unstable position as it's rotating. So when it encounters friction, it's going to be a more dynamic change of direction off of it. So those two values work in combination. Really, the total differential is mostly, almost exclusively controlled by the pin to finger grip or the pin to COG distance. So that's going to give you your overall strength. And the aggressiveness or the shape of the change of direction is controlled by the pin to PAP, and that's going to control how much torque or breakpoint shape you get once the ball starts to hook. So you can have an aggressive shape, but more stable roll, or vice versa, those two work in conjunction. And our recommendation, since the finger holes contribute so much difference in the change in differentials, we recommend sticking in the benchmark range of pin to PAPs and not changing them as much with no thumb bowlers, because you have a lot more tools, you have a lot more levers to pull on the layout situation for no thumb bowlers. Because
okay, and what is I think you said a benchmark range for pin to PAPs.
Yeah, so it really does depend on your speed to rev rate matchup, but you ask 100 pros and 90 of them will say 5 inches, and that is a very safe distance because it's a nice combination of strength and control. If you're slightly speed dominant, 4.5 inches is a nice controlled benchmark to start from. If you're slightly rev dominant, 5 inches. And if you're very rev dominant, you can go 5.25, 5.5 as a starting benchmark. And you can play around within a half, 3/4 of an inch in one direction or another, depending on the ball or the shape you want to make with the ball. So I like to pair slightly more aggressive pin to PAP distances with slightly more aggressive pin to center of grip distances, pair strength with strength and weak with weak. So if I do, say, a 2.5 inch dot to center of grip distance, then I might do like a 5.25 inch dot to PAP. And if I do a stronger 4.5 inch pin and dot I use interchangeably, so excuse me for that. If I use a stronger dot to center of grip distance, like 4.5 inches, I might pair that with like a 3.75 inches, slightly stronger dot to PAP position too, and they complement each other. You get a little more diverse range of ball motion where the weaker layouts are a little weaker, the stronger layouts are a little stronger, and you don't clump all your ball motions together in the middle that way.
Something you mentioned there in terms of like the closer pin to PAP distances being more unstable. I think I probably need to kind of understand that a bit better, because I kind of always thought if the ball flared less, that meant the core was more stable if the ball flared less. But
yeah, so don't conflate in your head the difference between the pin to PAP and the pin to COG. So pin to PAP, 3 3/8 is going to be the most unstable. That's going to be 45 degrees from your PAP. And as you get longer, 4 inches, 5 inches, now 6 inches is straight up and down. 6 3/4 is straight up and down, but you don't want to go that long. So the most unstable and probably the highest flaring is going to be 3 3/8. Now we're talking about pin to PAP. But then you get on the other side of it and it goes back the other way again. If you get less than 3 3/8, 3 inches, 2 inches to the PAP, the core's laying down. That is very early, very quitty. I call it quitty because it's very like early stable ball motion where it wants to read the fronts and then do nothing down lane. So unless you're looking for a purpose-built short pin layout, we don't recommend anything less than like 3.5 inches. But yeah, your most dynamic, most unstable reaction is going to be at 3 3/8 or 3.5 is our recommendation. And then as you go longer toward 5 inches, the core is more upright as it's tumbling. It's a little more stable. It flares less because of that. And when it encounters friction, it goes a little more forward as opposed to a little more sideways in terms of the motion shape.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, great.
Yeah. So we'll just wrap this up. So we were talking a couple slides ago about what happens, why we can't really use dual angles and why we need a converter just to get that VAL angle the right number for every player. So I have just a couple examples. The first example, this is the same ball. It's Troublemaker Solid, or excuse me, it's the original Troublemaker. And what we've done is we've applied the exact same dual angle layout on it. So we have not used the DV8 converter at all. We've just applied dual angles, just like it's written, standard dual angles that every pro shop knows. And all we've done is we've changed the horizontal, or excuse me, the vertical component of the PAP. So let's pretend these are two different bowlers. The bowler on the left has a 5/2 down PAP. The bowler on the right has a 5/2 up PAP. And we've applied the exact same dual angle layout. 80-degree drilling angle, 5-inch pin to PAP, 30-degree VAL angle. So you'll notice there's your 80-degree drilling angle, 5 inches on the surface of the ball from the pin or the dot to the PAP, and the drilling angle 30 degrees. That's for the over and down coordinate. The exact same layout's been applied to the over and up coordinate. You've got 80-degree drilling angle and a 5-inch dot to PAP, and your VAL angle is still 30 degrees. Now, if I put a prosect on both of these two balls, the dot to center of grip is dramatically different. So we've got the prosect on 0 here on the over and down PAP coordinate. That dot to center of grip distance is 3 3/8. Okay. So that is like in the, we'll call it the bowl of the core. That's in kind of the neutral zone for these layouts. Now, if you look at the bowler on the right who has the up over PAP, that distance is way different. It's almost 5 inches from the dot to the center of grip. And those are both with 30-degree drilling angles. The difference is the vertical component of the PAP has dramatically changed how high the pin ends up, right? Yeah. So these, you think 30 degrees is the same. You're going to get the same resulting motion. But if these players are twins and the only difference is their release at the bottom, but their rev rate, their speed, their rotation, all the stuff is the same, these motions will not be the same because you've removed way different. You've removed material here for the over down coordinate, material here for the over up coordinate. This ball on the right will be a much more dynamic layout, a much stronger layout for that player than it is for the player on the left. So we can right size that by running the numbers through the converter. We'll get two different VAL angles for these two different players. And what that will do is make sure that they have the same layouts on them. So now we have converted dual angle layouts. And I picked 83 because that was the closest. What I did was I ran the PAPs for each individual bowler, 5/2 down. And I picked 5 inches as the PAP for a symmetrical ball, and I picked 3.5 inches. That was the closest I had to the 3 3/8 that this gave me. I picked 3.5 because they're in half-inch increments in the converter. So I just picked 3.5. So I input the bullish PAP, 5 inches, and 3.5 dot to center of grip distance for both players. The only input difference I did was making sure that I changed the PAP coordinate, and what we got was the exact same distance on the surface of the ball. Now notice how dramatically different the location of the pin looks in reference to the center of grip. But despite that, the distances are exactly the same. So 5/2 down, this is a 29-degree drilling angle to get the pin to be 3.5 inches to the center of grip. And on this other player, that VAL angle, instead of being 29 degrees, had to be 50 degrees to get the pin exactly 3.5 inches from the dot to the center of grip. So if we roll to the next slide, these are the exact two same balls. We've just applied the prosect on top of them to take a measurement. And you'll see that with the prosect on 0 on the pin, the center of grip is 3.5 inches for the over and down coordinate. And even though the pin looks like it's in a dramatically different location, it's 0 on the pin and 3.5 at the center of grip. So we have removed the exact same core material by drilling into the exact same part of the core for these two different players, but it required a much different drilling angle for each player to achieve that.
Right.
Yeah.
Different
That's the
valve.
utility of the,
A different valve angle, you mean, right?
Yeah. Did I say drilling angle?
Yeah, different VL angle. Yeah.
Yep.
Obviously, if you guys have any questions down in the comments, let us know. I'm going to fire away some of my questions now, and if you have to reshare the presentation, you can. I only have a few. We were able to touch on some of them, but I do think the first one that's really important to touch on for consumers, and I'll probably reiterate this at the beginning of the video, is for a long time, the reason why you went to a certain pro shop operator was because of how it felt. Because exactly like Brian said at the very beginning, we were locked into the bowling ball with our thumb, and we wanted to make sure the guy knew what he was doing when drilling our ball to make sure we could easily get out. Well, now with two-handed bowling, exactly like you said, PAPs can be all over the place because now there's no problem getting out of the ball. We can throw it a lot of different ways two-handed and still get out of the ball. So now the key component isn't necessarily always choosing a pro shop operator because it has to fit right as a two-handed bowler, but it's choosing the right pro shop operator that can understand all of these elements and get you the correct layout. Should you choose a bowling ball that starts at certain core numbers, or should you choose a bowling ball and then choose a layout that can alter the core properties quite a bit? Would you say that's a fair summary, Brian, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I like where you're going with that. I will add that the Venn diagram of pro shop operators who fit well and understand this technology, they probably overlap a lot. If your pro shop operator is drilling out of a garage and doesn't do much with spans and layouts, then he probably doesn't understand the no thumb technology that well either. So just finding a reputable, truly professional pro shop is really key. And one key component for you, if you're a league bowler who only bowls one league a year or something like this, it's a little less vital. But if you're a player who bowls multiple leagues or does local traveling tournaments or wants to dabble in regional PBA tournaments or just traveling regionally on the weekends and being a weekend warrior for tournaments and things, you absolutely 100% have to have your PAP checked, because pro shop operators who aren't as savvy with this type of technology will put the pin loosely above the bridge somewhere over here. Now, we've seen in the course of this presentation that can be two very different locations depending on your PAP. You could get very different resulting ball motions. So you want to make sure that you're going to a pro shop operator who knows what your PAP is, who checks it semi-regularly. If you're a league bowler who does some tournaments once a year is probably enough. If you're a very serious regional level player, multiple times a year is my recommendation to make sure that you're getting the most accurate layouts. And if they're checking your PAP, then they're probably savvy enough to understand the technology. And of course, all these resources are available to you. DV8bowling.com. I didn't do that, but DV8bowling.com, there's a drop down for products. And then if you go to bowling balls, underneath the bowling balls section, there's a drop down list. There is a section called No Thumb Resources right there on the website.
Okay, yeah, I'll link to it. I'll link to it in the description down below.
Yeah, that's perfect. You can either go to DV8bowling.com and mess with the drop down menus to get there, or you can scan the QR code that is on the box. It's not on all the DV8 boxes, just the ones for the cores that incorporate no thumb technology. Yeah, so it's a little hidden. I think if you don't follow the DV8 pages on social media, you don't necessarily even know they're there, which is a big reason that I wanted to present this to you guys. Just knowing that those resources are out there, and even if your pro shop is a savvy pro shop who checks PAPs and does a great job with the fit, he might not necessarily know that these resources are available to use as a resource to them. So don't be afraid to educate them as well by saying, hey, check this out. Mess around, go click the downloaded links and check it out. And
tell me if you think this is kind of, because exactly like you said, bowling is such a beautiful sport in the fact that you can do it extremely recreationally, or you can do it as a very, very serious competitive hobby. And so I'm trying to think of it almost in layers that's like actionable depending on the viewer, right? And so tell me what you think of this, and maybe we can modify it together. But in my mind, probably the most important step, if you're a two-handed bowler that is throwing a curve, right? Even if it's not too often you're a league bowler, probably the first basic step is for the pro shop person to at least see your style, right? Because the
Yeah.
two-handed, like you said, the PAP and the two-handed style can be so various. You know, even if you're a new bowler only with one ball, you got to know if they're flaring on top of the ball or on the side, you know. So I would say probably the first fundamental step is make sure the person's at least seeing your style. So, which does throw e-commerce. It is a difficulty for e-commerce. Now, there might be some e-commerce sites that will watch video and work with you on that, but if you're getting a really low price to just punch 2 holes in it and they can't see your style, then it might be a little bit of a crapshoot. Doesn't mean you won't like it. Now, and then maybe the next step after seeing your style is finding your PAP. You know, like you said, once you maybe have an arsenal, that would be the next step. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I would say if you're getting a little more serious, or your style is getting a little more stable, you know, when you're first learning to bowl, of course, your speed, your hand position can be a little all over the place. And as you learn and grow with your own personal style, things will start to stabilize and become more normal shot over shot. At that point, regardless if you have 1 ball or 3 balls, that's when you need to get your PAP checked so that the next equipment purchase that you make rolls well for your particular style. And you'll notice the difference there. And on the point of e-commerce, there's also a lot of standalone shops. Maybe your friend's friend drills out of his garage or something like that. Those aren't particularly, they like you said, they are probably the cheaper option, but they're not necessarily the reputable option. So do make sure that you have access, even if it is a standalone shop. Sometimes they have a lane in their shop, or sometimes they'll just go to a local bowling center with you. If they're willing to meet you and go through that extra step, then that proves to me, and it should prove to you, that they're willing to go the extra mile and that they kind of have a handle on what they're doing, right? As opposed to punching 2 holes in it move the car out of the garage so I can get to the press and put 2 holes in it. That usually doesn't have good results.
Right. So probably most like basic levels, at least seeing their styles. Next level is probably finding PAP. And now, do you think like kind of that third level that would even say, okay, not only can they take all the two-handed style considerations to it, but they also kind of understand they have the kind of more updated understanding of layouts for two-handed, in the fact if they are mentioning or understand pin to center of grip. So almost as that third level, you know, asking them questions or hearing language around pin to center of grip. Do you think that's a fair like third level of, hey, the customer service there's, the technicals there, but I also understand that this particular number is important for two-handed bowling?
Yeah, and that's something that might not just come up in casual conversation with a customer, right? So like if you're seeing this as a customer, maybe you're a two-handed bowler who's just getting into that step, don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions about that to your pro shop operator. If they're a little unsure about it, they might need help being educated as well. And of course, you can link them to their DV8 resources as well. I do give pro shop operators in today's age a little bit of leeway, because even though we're talking about decades of no thumb bowling now, the information about layouts and core technology is still kind of in its infancy. This technology is like still patent pending, and it's for DV8 is still patent pending, and it's relatively new. But even 2LS, even no thumb layouts in general, are in their infancy. So like up until like this decade, like pro shop operators had no resources or no knowledge of this stuff. So if they're an older pro shop that's been around since the 80s and the 90s, and they're not keeping up with the latest and greatest online, then it's very possible that they simply just need educated themselves. And so don't be afraid to ask the questions, guide them in the right direction. Hopefully they're willing to check it out and learn alongside you. So
exactly. And even myself and a lot of the guys on the Virtue team who try to pride ourselves in always staying up to date with it. It's hard to always stay up to date.
And there's a lot going on, right? Because it's moving fast. Like now that we're learning about it, we're updating systems. Obviously now there's 3 or 4 reputable layout systems, whereas 15 years ago, there might have only been like dual angles and maybe like the old ARC system to put layouts on a ball. But now we have those systems on top of 2LS, on top of PAL, on top of now we're calling it just DV8 no thumb. There's not really a name here because it really is still dual angles. We're just converting the VAL angle. But yeah, so now the number of systems that are required to know and understand has gotten new and fast, is changing.
Yeah, 100%. So the next question I guess that I had is kind of a very common one, and I've asked this to other engineers, and it's always a popular question, especially when you see some stuff trending online, social media, of like layouts don't really matter, you know, those kinds of things. As the core engineer, right, how do you think about cover stock versus layout or core?
Yeah, I mean, people will throw out numbers, but they're like kind of unfounded, like based on the number that I made up. And I don't have a number to like, I don't have statistics to back it up. So I'm not going to say 70% this, 30% that. You will find, especially in neutral layout scenarios, that the cover stock is, of course, the cover stock in combination with the surface finish is going to dominate the ball motion. There are subtle differences in the layouts and in the core shapes that will make a dramatic difference down lane. Yes, the cover stock is the most important factor, but it's all a system that works in tandem. So the cover stock is going to dominate the length phase of ball motion, the first call it 40 feet of the lane, and how fast the ball slows down. The ball cannot change directions until it slows down. It's like hydroplaning on ice. The ball has to find friction in the same way that the tires have to find road before they traction and change direction. So the cover stock technology is very important about how easily it skids and then how fast it slows down. Once the ball does slow down, which is dominated by the cover stock properties, then the core side of things really takes over and dictates the shape and the abruptness of the change of direction. So that's where you really see the core components come into play, and to a lesser degree, the layouts as well. But with purpose-built cores such as this one, the layouts become much more vital and much more higher percentage of change, so to say, from layout to layout relative to like standard cores, and then layouts on the ball matter that much more. And it is kind of unfortunate because I have heard what people consider to be really reputable, like online resources, say things like, oh, layouts don't matter. But in the same breath, they'll be talking about pin to PAP position, or, oh, I changed my layout to do this in another video after having an online flame war about layouts not mattering. So like they do, but it is a system and they all have to work together in tandem. If you have someone who's ignoring one component of the system, then they don't have the ability to fine tune the reaction to maximize the performance for you.
When I'm explaining it as a coach, you can tell me what you think about this or add to it, modify to it. Is I usually say, you know, the cover stock is the most dominant part, right? It kind of like I think that you're saying. It does have the biggest kind of impact. The reason it's hard to say that it's most important is because the way scoring works. And so the reason I say that is like, I can get to the pocket a lot in bowl, you know, 190, and I can get to the pocket a lot in bowl 270, you know? And so what I find generally is, if you know you are not anywhere close to the pocket consistently, you know, and this is for obviously bowlers of 180 and up, 190 and up, where pin carry and, like you said, the ball motion down the lane once the ball slows down starts to matter. So for those bowlers, if you're like not around the head, you know, pocket often, then you know, cover's probably where you want to start. Without a doubt, for me anyways, the difference between 190 ball reaction and 260 ball reaction is not usually the cover. It's usually the shape down the lane, you know, because I can hit the pocket 6-7 times and bowl a 90. Anybody who, you know, doesn't believe me hasn't seen me bowl league, you know. So
I usually do both in one night. I usually bowl like 170 and 260 in a night.
But yeah, that's how I reference it, is that, you know, the cover is the most dominant, but it doesn't really mean it means it's more important if you want to get to 180, right? If you're like, I can only stand here and I can only throw here, I can't really move my feet, and I keep like destroying the 3-pin as a right-hander, like I just, you know, the 3-6, I can't even get to the pocket, no doubt. But once you get to that skill level, kind of 180 and above, where you're getting to the pocket, now layout, the core, those kinds of things really matter a lot, because they impact entry angle, they impact, you know, how quickly the ball's losing axis rotation, which can really impact, you know, how much area you have down lane to miss. And that's really where scoring potential can go up. So to a degree, you know, cover really matters, I think, getting from 140 to 190. But then once you're in that range and you're in the pocket consistently, what's under the hood and how you position it really can be the difference between 260 ball reaction and 190 ball reaction. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And I think that really harkens back to the previous conversation we were having about how important it is to make sure that your pro shop is up to speed on what's going on here. Because as we demonstrated, we can have a core that's in the 50s or 60s in total differential, or we can have a core that's in the 30s in total differential. Your flare spacing can be this or this with the same core with different layouts. So having a pro shop operator that knows, I want a weak layout, I have to put the fingers here. I want a strong layout, I have to put the fingers here, is going to be really critical to your performance as a bowler. Because you know, if you're in a flood of oil and you need to hook the lane, that 38 differential ball isn't going to get you all too far, right? So like, you know, it behooves you to have a good pro shop operator that helps you get the ball in your hands. Even if it's all a little bit above your understanding, having someone who can guide you and kind of get those layouts right for you is going to benefit your game. Even if you only understand it at the top level, if you don't understand it super granularly, that's okay. As long as they know how your game works.
Yeah. And I always use guys like Pete back in the day as a good reference. I mean, there's some of the best players in the world, like Pete Weber, who they do not care about the technical. They don't know the technical. Correct. They lean on their ball rep a lot. And, you know, the ball reps out on tour are usually the best ones. So, yeah, you don't necessarily have to know the stuff, but you got to have a good pro shop and then trust in them as well. So I think my final question, and I'll let you go, is, seems like pretty cool technology with the two-handed cores. You know, we've seen stuff like the Dynamic Core, I think is the name of it, end up kind of being used across all the brands at Brunswick. Do you think down the line we're going to start to see some of this core technology used in, you know, places like Hammer, for example, where I'm sure there's some hammer heads going like, you know, I just only...
Well, the same guy's designing hammer and DV8 balls, so don't be afraid to pick up a DV8 ball. But I will say that it's been in talks, but we need some differentiators as well, because we've got a lot of brands under our umbrella, and you know, the smaller brands, they need to find their place, their foothold in the market. Hammer sells on coolness and the range of versatility of ball motion. You know, they have to be big, bold designs, but they also have to be marketable to the masses, the most amount of people that buy them. DV8 has the unique ability to kind of pick a lane, and the lane that we went here is the no thumb technology, and that really separates it from the Brunswicks, the Hammers, the Tracks of the world, because although they all have similar cover technology and chemistry, you can really differentiate the brands by the core shapes and motions. So I designed for 3 of the companies I mentioned. I designed for DV8, I designed for Hammer, and I also designed for Columbia as it stands. Now, of course, Aaron, our other core designer, he designs for the other 3, and Radical has their own core designer, Steve. But we share data and information, so it's just when the rubber meets the road and we go to design in the actual SolidWorks program, that's who's in charge of it. But within those brands, there has to be some differentiation too. So like I said, Hammer, we're targeting bold ball motion, but we're also targeting core shapes that work for a range of layouts, a range of player styles, and kind of can't miss, this is going to roll good motion. DV8, we're targeting layouts that work, and I should mention these layouts, or excuse me, these core technology, it works for thumb in players as well. It's not going to hurt the ball motion at all to put fingers and a thumb in it. You don't get like the crazy range of numbers or anything like that. It's going to be pretty standard and pretty true to the undrilled numbers, in the sense that if you have a mild ASIM, you'll get a mild ASIM out of it as a no thumb bowler. And then Columbia.
Real quick, before we move on to Columbia, sorry, I wanted to, you mentioned the thumb in thing. Is thumb in going to see the same range? So I think you went all the way from 030 to 060, right?
No, not at all. And I'll tell you why. When you put your hand in a ball as a thumb in player, you put your fingers in this location, which we know from the PowerPoint is a weak layout for no thumb bowlers, but then you put your thumb hole in this location, which we know from the PowerPoint, if it was just the fingers, if you put them down here, that's a strong location. So we've driven the differential down with the fingers, but then we've driven the differential back up with the thumb, and it's a little bit net neutral. So your pinup layouts are going to be a little stronger overall with a little more intermediate differential than the undrilled ball. And your pin down balls, which place the fingers here and the thumb here, are going to be also relatively net neutral, but the layout is a little weaker overall. So you still got your weak layouts, your strong layouts. That toggles exactly like any other core would. You might have just a little more intermediate differential after drilling than any standard core because of how much mass. You might clip that with your thumb on some of the pinup layouts. But relatively speaking, it's going to act just like a normal core. You don't have that crazy range of motion because the fingers and the thumb are 2 points of mass removal. And that was really the difficulty with designing a core specific to no thumb bowlers. You've only got 1 point of mass removal. How do you help them?
Yeah, that's great. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think
all I was saying with Columbia was that.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just that hammer we designed for bold ball motion for the widest range of players. DV8, we've targeted the no thumb technology and also not just the cores, but also cover stock pairings that work well for no thumb bowlers. We actually have a no thumb bowler on our testing staff now, AJ Wolstenholme. Yeah, he came from Weber International, throws the ball amazingly. And he can give us now instantaneous feedback on all the no thumb core cover pairings. And for Columbia, we're looking for a smoother, more gradual retro style ball motion. You see a lot of those old throwback cores that used to be nameplates in the 90s and early 2000s, like the Pulses, like the Piranhas, things of that nature. But not only are we bringing like the core shapes back, we're also trying to bring back the feel of the ball motion, what those particular line of balls did back in the 90s, obviously updating them with new technology for the modern game, but trying to bring some of that throwback old school symmetrical shape to those cores. So when you throw it, you truly feel like you're throwing that old shape, except on new modern oils, as opposed to something like a hammer, which is new all the time, but also more about strength and sharpness as opposed to Columbia. So I like designing for all three of these brands because I go into the design phase with a completely different mindset depending on the brand, right? So, you know, we're trying to pick a lane for the smaller brands. So that's what we did with Columbia. That's what we did with DV8. And brands like Brunswick and Hammer are designed for the masses.
Okay, cool, Brian. Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time. And if you come up with some kind of new invention between now and in the future, I'd be happy to have you on again, and we can nerd out together.
Yeah, I will say that this no thumb technology, the reason I wanted to get on with you guys is because we're kind of full court press here at DV8. You'll see more and more nameplates. We've got, of course, the Troublemaker line, the Dark Side line. You will continue to see those. And we've got some exciting new stuff at the end of 2026 that I can't quite talk about yet, but I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to be pretty cool. And the no thumb game is not going away by any stretch of the imagination. And so we are going to tailor products to no thumb bowlers because they're a growing and popular segment. So yeah. Craig, thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the viewers who made it this far, all three of them that made it this far into the presentation.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found this video useful. As always, if you like videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.